You ever notice how silence is supposed to scare them, but when you don't break it, when you don't cave, that's when the panic sets in, not for you, for them, for the avoidant ex who thought you'd always chase. And here's the jaw-dropper. 93% of avoidant exes spiral the moment you don't break contact. Yeah, I said it, 93%. The numbers don't lie, because silence is a weapon, a mirror, a trigger, and the avoidant mind, it wasn't built to handle a mirror that doesn't blink. You think they're strong because they walked away. You think they're unshakable because they looked you in the eye and said, "I need space." But deep down, they expected one thing, that you'd break first, that you'd text, that you'd call, that you'd chase, that you'd reassure them they're still the center of your universe. When you don't, when you stay grounded, composed, unavailable, that's when their entire internal system starts glitching. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And in this case, the best revenge is silence. Silence they can't control. Silence they can't predict. Silence that exposes their own emptiness. Listen, this isn't theory. This is psychology. Attachment research proves it. Avoidants thrive on distance, but secretly need pursuit to feel wanted. When the pursuit stops, the ground beneath them crumbles. That's why they spiral. That's why they start checking your socials at 2 a.m. That's why they hover on your page, but never like. That's why they tell themselves they're fine while staring at the ceiling in the dark. Because silence forces them to face what they ran from. Not you, not the relationship, themselves. And let me tell you, most can't handle that storm. Here's the real twist. It's not the silence that breaks them. It's the fact that you don't break it. Think about that. They've trained themselves to expect chaos, fights, begging, crying. But when you respond with calm, when you answer with distance, when you stay silent longer than they can, that's when the mask slips. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters." Your reaction, your refusal to react, is what flips the script. They're not used to it. They don't know what to do with it. And eventually they spiral. This isn't about punishing them. This isn't about revenge. This is about you choosing power over panic, control over chaos, dignity over desperation. And here's the promise. If you stay with me through this video, you're going to see the 3 key reasons why silence destroys their comfort zone. Why 93% of avoidant exes break down when you don't fold, and why staying silent longer than they expect flips the entire dynamic in your favor. But first, let me check you. Are you even ready for this? Because this episode isn't for the weak. It's not for the one waiting for permission to heal. It's not for the one still crying over their phone hoping for a text. This is for the ones who are ready to stop bleeding for people who never deserved their blood. This is for the ones who are done bending, done chasing, done begging. If that's you, lock in. Don't scroll. Don't click away. Don't distract yourself. Sit here. Listen. Feel this. Because if you make it to the end of this video, you're going to walk away with something most people never get. Clarity. Strength. And a mindset shift so powerful that your ex will feel it even in your silence. See, most people never get to this level. Most crack by day 3. Most send that "hey" text just to feel something back. Most let their emotions run the show. But you're not most. You're not average. You're here because you're ready to weaponize silence. You're here because you want the blueprint. You're here because you're tired of letting them hold the remote control to your emotions. You ever wonder why so many avoidant exes try to replace you fast? It's because they can't sit with silence. They can't face the mirror. They can't live with the thought that you're not orbiting them anymore. And every single day you stay silent, their story gets weaker. Their excuses collapse. Their new replacement starts to feel like a band-aid, not a cure. That's when the spiral begins. That's when the facade cracks. That's when regret sneaks in through the cracks they can't seal anymore. And you sit in silence, unbothered, unshaken, unavailable. That's the kind of energy that can't be ignored. That's the kind of strength that pulls people back. That's the kind of power that transforms you from replaceable to unforgettable. Enjoyed this video? Here's how to level up with Ace Wisdom. Drop a like if this hit home. It helps more people find the truth they need to hear. Subscribe if you're ready to outgrow the old version of yourself. We break down emotional patterns, psychology, and real power moves after heartbreak. If you're serious about healing, detaching, and becoming untouchable, this is your space. Turn on all notifications so you never miss when a new video drops. Want deeper insights, plus exclusive content? Join the channel membership, Spark of Wisdom, Wisdom Warrior, or step it up a notch by becoming an Ace of Aces member. The link is in the video description. Know someone who needs this message? Share this video with a friend who's stuck, confused, or ready to rise. You could be the reason they finally let go and step up. Volume 8 is about to take you deeper than any series before. This is their breaking point. Silence, replacement, and regret. And episode 2, it's the one they'll wish you never watched. Let's begin. You want to know why silence burns them so deeply? Because the avoidant ex is addicted to your pursuit. Let's call it what it is: ego fuel. That chase, those texts, those late-night calls begging for clarity. That wasn't connection to them. That was validation. Proof they still mattered. Proof they still had control. When you cut that off, when you stop feeding their ego, everything they've built their identity on starts to collapse. Here's the truth. Avoidants don't leave because they're done. They leave because they assume you'll keep running after them anyway. They believe you'll always orbit them like the sun. They want the distance and the pursuit at the same time. But silence? No chasing? No "I miss you" texts? That's the kryptonite. Because now the power flips. Now you're not orbiting them. They're orbiting you. They may never admit it, but inside they're checking their phone, refreshing your profile, stalking without leaving a trace. And here's where it gets interesting. Attachment psychology tells us the avoidant survives off a contradiction. They want closeness, but the moment they get it, they run. They want distance, but the moment they get it, they panic. So your silence forces them into the one scenario they can't control: distance without pursuit, space without reassurance, time without ego strokes. And that's when the spiral starts. Think about it. They walked away, thinking, "I can breathe again." But when the air gets too quiet, when you don't chase, that quiet becomes suffocating. They don't know how to breathe without the attention they swore they didn't want. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And the avoidant wastes theirs playing power games until silence shows them the game's over. At first, they'll act unbothered. They'll post stories, selfies, fake smiles. They'll act like they're thriving. But that's smoke, that's theater, that's performance for an audience that's no longer watching. And when the curtain falls, the ego collapses. That collapse looks like random texts out of nowhere, liking old posts just to signal they're still around, asking mutual friends about you without admitting it, trying to replace you fast, only to feel emptier with every new distraction. Because here's the cold reality. Ego collapses when the supply is cut off, and silence cuts deeper than any argument ever could. You didn't block them. You didn't beg them, you didn't chase them, you simply starved their ego of oxygen, and that's why 93% spiral, not because of you, but because they finally feel the emptiness that's been hiding under their avoidance all along. It's like pulling the mask off in broad daylight. They can't unsee it. They can't pretend it's not there. They can't fill the void with likes, replacements, or fake indifference. Your silence becomes their mirror, and ego doesn't survive mirrors. It survives attention. No attention, no chase, no fuel. The spiral is inevitable. Here's what you need to lock in. You're not starving them out of cruelty. You're simply refusing to play their game anymore. And that refusal is the strongest move you'll ever make. Remember this. The moment you stop chasing is the moment they start. Not always out loud, not always directly. But in their head, they're running laps trying to figure out why you're not cracking like everyone else did. That's your edge. That's your leverage. That's your power. So if you're sitting there wondering why your silence feels heavy, remember this. It's not heavy for you. It's heavy for them. You're not spiraling. They are. Because ego collapses without pursuit, and your silence isn't weakness. It's the demolition of their false power. Key point 2. Silence forces them to face the void. They run from you, want to know the real reason your silence rattles them, because avoidants aren't running from you, they're running from themselves. That's the truth nobody wants to admit. The late replies, the cold shoulders, the walls. It's not about you, it's about the storm inside them they've been dodging since day one. And when you don't break contact, when you don't chase, when you stop cushioning their fear with your reassurance, that storm comes crashing in. Avoidants are masters of distraction. They'll bury themselves in work, in friends, in hookups, in replacements, anything to avoid sitting in silence with their own mind. But when you step back, when you refuse to reach out, you take away their safety net. Now, there's no distraction left. Now, they're stuck with the one thing they've always avoided, themselves. Let me put it like this. Your silence turns their bedroom into an echo chamber. Every unhealed wound, louder. Every unresolved fear, clearer. Every, what if I was the problem, thought, unavoidable. And that's when the spiral begins. Psychology proves it. Avoidant attachment develops from inconsistent love, from parents who weren't emotionally available. They learn early on, don't need too much, don't depend too much, don't feel too much. So as adults, they avoid intimacy. But here's the kicker. The need never disappears. It just hides under layers of denial. Your silence strips those layers away. At first, they'll resist it. They'll double down on the mask. They'll laugh louder in group photos. They'll post about how free they feel. They'll tell themselves they've moved on. But behind that performance, silence creeps in, and silence doesn't lie. It doesn't matter how many distractions they pile up. The quiet at night doesn't care. The phone that doesn't buzz, it tells the truth. The mirror in the bathroom, it asks questions they can't answer. That's why silence is so devastating, because it removes the noise they use to escape the void, and the void is terrifying. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But avoidants have never learned that. They keep chasing outside events until your silence reminds them the real battlefield is internal. That's why they spiral. That's why they start replaying old conversations in their head. That's why they stalk your page in the middle of the night. That's why they run into replacements that never satisfy. Because silence drags them to the place they've been running from their whole life. And listen, this isn't about punishing them. It's not about making them suffer. It's about reality. Reality they've ignored for years. Reality they can't escape once you stop being the buffer. Think about it. When you break no contact, you rescue them from their own discomfort. You give them reassurance. You give them ego fuel. You let them avoid their void. But when you stay silent, you don't rescue them. You let them sink. You let them meet themselves in the dark. And most can't handle that confrontation. So they spiral. They spiral because the silence forces reflection. They spiral because they can't fix the hole inside with quick replacements. They spiral because for the first time in a long time, they're not running from you. They're running from themselves. And you sit in peace. You sit in power. You sit in silence. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to let them face their own storm. That's the difference. That's the shift. That's why 93% of avoidant exes spiral when you don't break contact. Because silence is the mirror they can't hide from. And when you hold that mirror up long enough, the void swallows the mask, and the spiral begins. Silence forces them to confront the void they've been escaping. You think avoidants fear losing you. Wrong. What they really fear is facing themselves. That's the engine behind their entire behavior. The late replies, the cold goodbyes, the fake detachment. None of it is about you. It's about keeping themselves from staring into the void inside. And here's the truth they'll never say out loud. That void is terrifying. See, avoidants have one lifelong pattern. Escape. Escape closeness. Escape conflict. Escape accountability. Escape themselves. But when you don't break contact, when you don't chase, when you don't rescue them from their own silence, that escape route slams shut. Now it's just them and their thoughts. And trust me, most avoidants don't last long in that arena, because silence is not neutral. Silence is confrontation. It drags out every suppressed fear they've buried for years. It amplifies every insecurity they thought they'd hidden. It forces every unresolved wound to scream louder. Think about it. They scroll, but nothing distracts them. They laugh in group photos, but the smile doesn't stick. They post about freedom, but the room feels colder than ever. Because silence doesn't let them hide. It exposes them. Attachment psychology makes it clear. Avoidants grew up learning that closeness equals pain. They trained themselves to detach, to need less, to numb out. But the need never disappears. It only hides under denial. And when you stay silent, that denial crumbles. Suddenly, they're alone with the truth they've been dodging since childhood. They crave connection but fear it. They want love, but can't handle it. They push you away, but panic when you don't return. That contradiction, it's mental chaos, and your silence turns up the volume until it's unbearable. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But the avoidant hasn't realized that. They still think strength comes from control. Control over you, control over distance, control over the chase. Your silence proves they have no control at all. That's why they spiral. Not because you punished them, not because you blocked them, not because you lashed out, but because you didn't move. And in that stillness, they're forced to face themselves. Look at what happens when the void creeps in. They replay old arguments in their head, wondering if they miscalculated. They stalk your profile but don't interact, because interaction means exposure. They rush into a replacement thinking new will drown out the old, only to feel even emptier. They tell themselves they're fine, while their chest tightens every time they scroll past your absence. That's the spiral. That's the crash. That's the reality silence forces them into. And here's what you need to lock in. If you break contact, you save them from that confrontation. You give them an escape hatch. You let them run again. But when you don't break, You force them into the fight they've been avoiding their whole life, and most avoidants don't win that fight. They don't face the void with strength. They drown in it. And while they're drowning, you're rising. You're calm. You're collected. You're silent, not because you're weak, but because you've mastered what they've always feared: stillness. That's why your silence is devastating. That's why 93% of avoidant exes spiral. Because it turns the lights on in the room they've kept dark for decades. And when the lights come on, they can't hide from what's staring back. Key point 3. Silence exposes their biggest fear. You're actually gone. Here's the truth that cracks them wide open. It's not the silence itself. It's what the silence means. Your avoidant ex built their entire power trip on one assumption: that you'd always come back. No matter how far they pushed you, no matter how cold they turned, no matter how fast they replaced you, they thought you'd fold. That's the story they tell themselves every time they run. I can disappear. They'll still be there when I return. But when you don't break contact, when you stay silent longer than they expected, that story collapses. And the collapse isn't gentle. It's violent. It's gutting. It's the spiral. Because suddenly the silence doesn't sound like space anymore. It sounds like finality, like you've moved on, like you've closed the door for good. That's their nightmare. Avoidants can handle temporary distance. They can handle you begging. They can handle drama, fights, even tears. But what they can't handle, the possibility that you've actually outgrown them, that you've seen through the game, that you've stopped orbiting their planet. That's when the regret creeps in. They start second-guessing the breakup. They start comparing their replacement to you, and the new person never measures up. They start remembering the times you showed up, the ways you cared, the energy you brought, and they realize silence means those things are gone, permanently. Here's the kicker. Psychology shows that regret hits hardest when the finality sinks in, not when the door is cracked open, but when it slams shut. Your silence slams that door, not with anger, not with drama, just with calm, consistent absence. And that calm is what terrifies them the most. Because if you're calm, it means you're not waiting. If you're calm, it means you're not desperate. If you're calm, it means you're already living a new story. A story where they don't exist. That's the breaking point. That's why they spiral. Not because silence hurts, but because silence means you're done. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." That's exactly what you're doing. You've stopped chasing what you can't control. You've taken your freedom back. And they feel it. That's why you'll see the random, "Hey stranger" texts. That's why they'll watch your stories but never interact. That's why they'll try to test the waters with breadcrumbs, because they can't stand the thought that silence means finality. That silence means they lost you for real. So here's what you do right now. Lock into that silence. Own it. Protect it. Because silence isn't weakness, it's strength. It's clarity. It's proof that you don't need their validation to breathe. And if you've made it this far in the video, I want you to comment one thing below. Here's your mantra. My silence is power. Write it, claim it, stamp it into your mind. Because the first person to comment it will get pinned, and everyone who types it will feel it echo back into their own life. That mantra is the truth. That mantra is the shift. That mantra is the reason 93% of avoidant exes spiral. Because while they're drowning in regret, in silence, in fear of losing you, you're rising, you're free, you're powerful, and nothing terrifies them more than that. The power of staying silent. So let's put it all together. We broke down the 3 reasons why 93% of avoidant exes spiral when you don't break contact. Their ego collapses without your pursuit. Their silence forces them into a void they can't outrun. And finally, the one that cuts deepest, silence shows them you're actually gone. That's the trifecta. That's the breaking point. That's the power you hold when you do nothing. Think about that for a second. No drama, no chasing, no begging. Just you, grounded in your own power. That's what flips the script. That's what makes you unforgettable. And let me remind you, this isn't about revenge. This isn't about making them hurt. This is about you, your discipline, your clarity, your freedom. Because silence isn't passive. It's not doing nothing. It's a decision. It's a choice. It's a declaration that you will not bleed for someone who cut you. Most people can't handle that. Most fold by day 5. Most send the just checking in text. Most hand their power away, but not you. Not anymore. You've just seen why your silence is devastating, why it forces them to spiral, why it turns the tables in ways they never expected. Now it's on you to hold that line, to stay calm, to stay consistent, to protect your peace at all costs. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." And that's exactly what you're doing every single day you don't break. So here's my challenge to you. Don't let this video just be information. Let it be transformation. Lock into the mantra. Live it. Repeat it every time the urge to break silence creeps in. My silence is power. And when you feel that strength, when you feel that calm, that's when you'll know you've already won. Because the truth is, the avoidance spiral isn't your concern anymore. Their collapse isn't your responsibility. Your only mission is to rise. And if you're ready to rise, then subscribe right now. Turn on notifications. Because this was only episode 2 of Volume 8, their breaking point. Silence, replacement, and regret. Episode 3, we're going even deeper. We're exposing what really happens when replacements backfire. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. So hit subscribe, drop the mantra in the comments, and keep walking in silence, because silence isn't empty, it's full of power, and it's the very thing that makes you unforgettable.